We've got one from Larissa Mitchell. Here we go. When we can get a microphone to you, we have now. Go ahead.
I am an ESL support teacher at Northmead CAPA High School. I'm currently working with Year 12 asylum seeker students who arrived in boat in 2012. They are studying for their HSC exams, yet their worries about their future are whether they can remain in Australia permanently or not. They are currently holding Bridging Visa E and will most likely transition to a temporary protection visa for 3 years or a Safe Haven Enterprise visa for 5 years. But they will never be able to apply for a permanent protection visa, leaving them in legal limbo, a state of uncertainty and doubtful for their futures. Jim Molan, what do you think is Australia's responsibility in ensuring that asylum seekers like my students can consider their futures with confidence in knowing that they will be able to call Australia their permanent and not temporary home?
Jim, I'm going to just pause you on that one for a minute because I'd like to hear from some of the other panellists. And Jane, give us your perspective on this first of all.
Yeah, I mean, back in the first time that temporary protection visas were used, when John Howard was Prime Minister, there was so much evidence as to the impacts they had on people's mental health, their inability to build a new life in Australia, living in constant fear that at the end of the expiry of that visa they might be sent home.
I should make the point, by the way, that there are a number of people in this audience, young people, who submitted questions to us and then withdrew them because they were afraid that their temporary protection status would be looked upon badly by the government. So they've withdrawn questions. We've got a teacher who's asking the questions on their behalf.
It's very telling. I mean, that's the sense of insecurity that people have. To put people in this limbo status is cruel, and furthermore, to deny them ever the possibility of reuniting with family members is perhaps the worst cruelty you could visit upon any person. Perhaps counterintuitively, but something that the government knows all too well, is when you grant people permanence, that is the time that they may take up an opportunity when it does become safe to return to their country and try and rebuild, because they've got that safety net. But without it, people are living in this constant state of fear. And I mean,
do you know how many people are we talking about?
Sorry, living
Australia?
in this constant... Well, at the moment, we've got around 30,000 people who are either on bridging visas or temporary protection visas. And it's a wasted generation. I mean, you think about the fact that many of these people were detained for years and years. These are people who are perhaps only just being able to access proper education. Whether they can go on to university, they're charged full international fees unless the universities waive those fees. It is really, it's not setting up anybody for a good future, whether that future is built in Australia, back in the country that they came from, or anywhere else.
All right, let's hear brief answers from this side of the panel. Frank.
First, thank you for being the teacher you are and the voice for the voiceless. That's what the country needs. Now, in terms of the issue, these were set up as deterrents because prior to 2013 there'd been an influx of boat people. As Jim has told us, and he's the authority, they're now safely and legally turning them back, though we might question that, but that's what he says is happening. Given that, there's now no need for that. And it's un-Australian. I say it's un-Australian for this reason. We're very different from a country like the United States, which is very used to having low-paid, illegal workers. We as Australians have always said, yep, we have secure borders, and guess what? Part of having secure borders is everyone within these borders is entitled to decent welfare, decent job opportunities and decent education opportunities. And to be creating second-order Australians is a disgrace. And there's no benefit for it because, as we're told, the boats are stopped.
And incidentally, you came to the conclusion not so long ago that stopping the boats was the right thing to do.
I came to the conclusion that given that people are not fleeing directly from persecution in Indonesia, and given that we have a situation where we have a commitment to a robust humanitarian program, then I would accept stopping of the boats, provided what was going on was transparent and I could be convinced that it was safe and legal. And definitely, if there be any people, if we ever have a situation in Indonesia where people are fleeing directly from persecution in that country, then I would say all bets are off.
Okay, now...
Firstly, all bets are off. You're exactly right in relation to people coming out of places like Irian. But to think that there is no need for the policy of Operation Sovereign Borders now is just basically wrong.
Well, how about let's go to the question specifically. We're being asked by a teacher whether temporary protection visas are working or whether they're actually negative and having poor consequences.
And I will, but could we talk about the need at some stage before we all go home?
Yeah, we can
because
do
that's
that,
key.
Yeah.
It is. It's very, very hard and it's very awful policy. And the only consolation I could make, and the only consolation I could offer you, is that the consequences for people coming to this country as IMAs, illegal maritime arrivals, or flying in to end up on temporary protection visas is what Operation Sovereign Borders has achieved. No deaths at seas, the boats going back, 17 centres closed, no children in
Jim, I'm going to interrupt you because
etc.
you say no deaths at sea, but here's a questioner who says there are deaths in Australia.